Hey,
Hello.
Dan.
All
Hi.
right, Dave.
I think we're live.
All right, this should be the podcast episode 2, topic 2.
Number two.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
What was the
How are
title you
you?
came up? I'm good. I've been very busy.
Uh, the title was Larger Thoughts on George Floyd and Derek Chauvin.
All right.
Chauvin.
Well, if we're going to get canceled, this is the exact time to do it. So we might as
That'll do it. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, there's no,
well,
yeah, no better time
we'll,
than the present, right?
we'll go out with a bang. Yeah.
It is.
All right, roll the intro.
Hey, yeah.
Okay.
Hey. All right. All right. Hey, first things first. Do you have anything to drink with you right now?
Yeah, I'm drinking Old Forester.
Oh, Old Forester. I have this beer called Plasma Gun from Edmonds Oast Brewing out of Charleston, South Carolina. It's really good. I found it at a local store.
I was literally in Charleston like yesterday, 2 days ago.
Yeah. Well, I was not in Charleston, so I'm not that cool. But found it at a local store. It's a West Coast IPA. Pretty tasty. I don't know. Just thought I'd share.
Is it a bitter IPA or like a fruity one?
Yeah, well, it's more hop forward and bitter. That's kind of the West Coast vibe for sure.
Yeah,
not fruity.
I like those.
The
fruity ones.
Yeah, I'm not a big fruity hoppy IPA guy. So yeah, or like hazy stuff. It's all fine, but they're everywhere, so it just gets a little boring. All right.
So,
Sorry.
Are we talking about booze in order to delay the inevitable?
No, I just thought it would be fun to chat. Like I was excited to pour it. We mentioned something off air what we were drinking the other day, so I just thought it'd be fun. So yeah, here we go.
All right. Well, I mean, I think it's one of those topics where I think we both have a lot that we would like to say, and then
yes,
but neither of us want to actually say those things.
Well, I mean, and to be honest with you, a lot of it's already been said. So I mean, there's not on specific details of everything. It's been a long year. I mean, this thing's been dragging on for a long time, and it's been a huge topic in American culture, and it's just been a huge thing. It's crazy, man. Because actually thinking back on it, had like all sorts of flashbacks from like around this time last year, because it was almost like a year ago, right? I think it was like April or May when that whole thing went down. Like the video came out and all that.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then like that whole summer was just crazy. So it was an interesting week to reflect back and think about what was going on a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the fact that we're both reticent to talk about it is indicative of sort of how the zeitgeist has gone, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that's kind of the point of the conversation too, or kind of
right. I mean, my thoughts aren't exactly, I'm not one of these people who's going to be like, the guy who like does the video from inside his truck, like, let me tell you the real truth about blah, 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 blah. What they're not going to tell you on the CNN is that, and then it's just like, neither of us were there. It's like, and neither of us have like sort of any kind of life experience directly related to any of the issues that really go on here. Like neither of us are police officers, nor have we worked as police officers. Neither of us are at present black men. So, we can't really speak to that experience either. So anything we say is inherently just sort of like our own sort of pontificating to the best of our abilities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you go first then, because I have thoughts on sort of the larger stuff, but you say what you want.
Yeah, man. Well, the first things that really strikes me, and this is a larger thought too. So like, I don't have I followed the trial on the super edges. I didn't really get in on all of that, but it's just crazy, man. Because like, even like I said, it's been a year, and like that video has been out less than a year, like the full video. So like, you have what people can see like right in front of you. It's all on video. Like it's not a thing where it's not like the O.J. Simpson trial where it was, substantial evidence and a bunch of no eyewitnesses, just a bunch of evidence and crazy court drama and that whole big thing that became this big television event for America to watch. But we had to like rely on literal nitty gritty court stuff. So I think everyone kind of made up their mind on what
It's
was
when
going
they
to
still
happen.
did the thing where on the nightly news they would have like the sketches,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they
the
would draw you
sketch drawings are cool.
drawing Judge Ito and Marsha Clark and all those people with like
Yeah, the
pencil
fans, the
drawings.
fact. Okay, I can't name any other judge on the planet except for maybe some Supreme Court judges. I know Judge Lance Ito. I could pick him out in a crowd. That's impressive because I was
Yeah.
like, what, 9 when that happened? No, a
we
little
were in
older
like
than that.
we were like 8th grade,
Early
7th
middle
grade.
school. Yeah, something like, okay, sorry, 11, 12. Okay, that's still impressive.
I remember when
I
I went to Poland with my parents the summer after 7th grade, and like one of the first things the Polish people asked us, like, "So what's going on with OJ?" I'm like, I don't know.
How are Bronco sales doing in the United States? Yeah. No, but like, all right. So just again, so we have this video and we have completely in our country polar opposite views of what happened, what should have happened, the appropriate judgment, appropriate trial outcome, and all that kind of stuff. And I mean that didn't just start today. Obviously, it didn't start with George Floyd, his death, and then the trial. But like, it's been, in my mind, exasperated over the last year. So we have, I don't know. I mean, again, maybe not popular opinions, fun stuff to talk about. You have protests. Okay. So is it a protest or is it a riot or is it a mostly peaceful protest? So you got 3 conversations about cities literally burning in the United States for months and months on end as a direct result of this guy's death. So it's like this, again, you have people staring at the exact same thing on a screen, people living it and still having different opinions on what's going on. Or maybe just this sick, weird semantic game on what other side it is, using words that we don't relate to in conversation anymore. Like if you say riot and you say protest, they're completely different words. And where it meets reality, I mean, I have my own opinion, but I mean, there's such a divide in our country that we can't even have that conversation anymore. And then, like, it keeps coming up again and again and again and again on whatever kind of issue we're coming up with. Like even in general, like this latest thing from, I think it was Columbus, Ohio. I'm guessing Ohio. I'm not even sure. That girl that was about to stab somebody.
I think it's Columbus.
Yeah, either way, regardless. So this girl was about to stab somebody, got shot by the police. And girl, she was like, what, 16 or something like that?
Yeah.
And now we're having now there's an actual conversation about how kids fighting with knives is normalized. And that's like a thing that's always happened. I mean, come on. I mean, that's ridiculous. And but that's that conversation is there just to have that it's the opposite point of view. It's like, oh, the cop shot this girl, and what seemed like a protecting another person who was in imminent danger. But now it's just like, well, that can't be the case because when a cop kills a black person, they're inherently racist and it's terrible. So therefore, let's normalize the behavior of fighting after school with knives. And that's just crazy talk to me. But like, that's crazy talk to that person. Either it's a weird justification or they literally mean it. And I don't know where that is anymore and what line we're at and like where we draw that kind of distinction. It's a super strange cultural moment where we have all this information in front of us and we can't agree on what seems to be obvious things. Like our interpretations are just all boop, 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 boop. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it's a phenomenon that is. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying I don't have a prescription for it.
No, I don't either. I mean,
it boggles and frustrates and is disheartening and is all those things. So
no, it's incredibly vexing. And I mean, well, okay. As a caveat, I think we're both in agreement that we both recognize that if the worst thing that this situation does to us is the fact that we don't know how to have a public conversation on the internet about it, then that is, I mean, I don't like to use the word privilege, but we do have that luxury that we're able to just sit here pontificating about it, and it doesn't directly affect us as much as it affects a lot of other people. So we do have that luxury, but maybe in one sense it gives us a little bit of objectivity. So that may or may not be true, but I think.
Fair enough.
The idea that a lot of people say we're in a culture war, right? So in a war, like you can't cede any sort of ground to the enemy, right? And I think maybe subconsciously a lot of people think that, well, if I agree that they made that 2% of a point, then Well, what's to stop them from taking 5% and 10%? And before you know, you've given them the
Sure.
whole thing. So you can't even, it doesn't allow for nuance, because the people
Yeah.
with, the people on the, like we talked about last week, the people on the extremes of the bell curve with the loudest opinions are the ones sort of driving the zeitgeist, right? What is it they say, that like 90% of the posts on Twitter come from like, 2% of active Twitter users? You know what I mean?
Really?
It's the 80-20. It's probably.
I'll say
exaggerated.
it's way worse than the 80-20 rule. If that's it, it's way way worse than that. Yeah.
So, as with any movement and in any sort of thing where you've got everybody weighing in, like they're all public figures, when everybody needs to know what I think,
Yeah.
like, no, they don't. People don't even need to know what we think. We're just a couple of dorks with computers. Probably
Exactly. As soon as you said that, I'm like, no one even needs to know what we think, man.
that's the ultimate irony,
we're out
right?
here
Because,
broadcasting it.
you and I have a conversation, and we immediately think this should be the podcast, right? People,
Yeah.
but do they? I mean, I don't know. I guess people are free to turn it off if they don't like it. But so, like,
We should change the name of the show to "This Should Be the Podcast." This should be the podcast.
can this be a podcast?
Question mark? Question
I don't
mark?
know. So,
Okay.
like, the idea of nuance is gone, right?
Correct.
And so you get the most virtue points by saying the most extreme thing. And then on the other side, not even necessarily choosing a side, but it's like anything that is indicative of letting the other side have their point, you can't let that go. It's like a bunch of people watching the same basketball game, watching the refs make the same calls, and one team is like, those refs were horrible, they're not calling anything. And then the other team is like, we played great. And the other team's like, no, you didn't play great. The refs called in your favor. But the people looked at the same calls, and they.
That's a super good analogy, man, because, as a New England Patriots fan, everybody hates Tom Brady. And now that he's with Tampa Bay, I get it, man. All those calls all go to Tom Brady, and it's freaking awful. And I hate him too. So I get that. No, that's a super good analogy. That's right.
I mean, so your loyalty to Brady stopped when he left the Patriots.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't
yes.
know what you
Okay. Sports ball thing. Yes.
Okay.
I'm a team guy, not a player guy.
Oh, because I know people who are just like, Brady's the GOAT, and they just follow him wherever he goes.
It's true he is the GOAT, but I didn't follow him. No.
Okay.
I don't want him to do poorly, as in I don't want him to get physically harmed, but I wish him no good luck.
Yeah.
I got nothing. No, he's fine.
That's
He's
fine.
all right.
Well, see,
I'm just kidding.
Well, that kind of mentality is, this is great, because that kind of mentality is perfectly acceptable in a sports, because the whole point of sports is to win.
Yeah.
The problem is we get used to that team sports mentality, and we take it over into real life.
Yes, into real life. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Like in the ancient in Rome, they would put people in the Colosseum with lions and stuff, and they'd fight to the death, and they would get out their bloodlust, and that was a way of sort of satiating the populace. But now we don't have that, so we just take it out on our neighbors. I don't know.
No, that's fair. No, I mean that's all a good point. And just like along those kind of lines, man. I mean, again, like I don't know if I'm making it to be too big of a deal, but like, or maybe it's always been this way, where there's just like an insanely divided spot or lines that are drawn at whatever cultural moment we're in and whatever generation, decade we're in. But like, I really like, just gosh, when you're in this age again, right? I'm harping on this, where it's like you and me are talking, right? And we have this live screens where we can see each other. And I'd be like, Dan, did you really like that yellow shirt I was wearing? You're like, Dave, you were wearing a black shirt. I'm like, no, dude, it was yellow. Okay. It was definitely yellow. That is my favorite yellow shirt with a bear and a shark on it. And you're like, nope, it was black. I was like, okay, so nope, we're done. That's it. That's the conversation. Like, you can't, where do we go from there in that particular conversation? Like when you just are knee deep in it and you stick hard to your guns there. Like, I really feel like as a culture, like America's just kind of like staying together for the kids. Like we're just hanging out like we need to be. And there's just this huge cultural divide, and we're on so many, not just this case, like this is just a microcosm or a small example of it, across culture, across politics, across, I don't know, religion, economics, like families. I mean, everything. We are so disparate, maybe because it's so big and we have such a huge cultural area to cover. That doesn't make any sense, but like a large, I don't know, we're just like such a wide, vast group of people. Like, Massachusetts has nothing to do with Florida. Wisconsin and Idaho are completely different. California is literally its own country. It would be like the fifth biggest country on the planet if it was its own country.
Yeah, no, I've been saying that for years.
Crazy.
Like the I forget what issue it was, but like you know, people say like, like people talk about like guns and stuff. They're like, why does America have such a violence problem? And the answers to that is not something that could be boiled into one sentence. And they say like, why is it so much different than like, these European countries or whatever? And it's like, well, technically, if you wanted to compare apples to apples, you can't compare America to Sweden or America even just to like Germany or France. You have to compare America to Europe, because it's like,
like the
geographical
entirety of
geographical size, population, and the amount of different kinds of disparate populations and economic, ups and downs.
Oh, that's a really good point.
That they're all there. And so if you compare that, well, we don't look that bad because Europe's been fighting each other for centuries, right?
Right.
And so like, there's no other nation in the world, I don't think, that has this number of different kinds of populations and backgrounds. And you know, it's like I forget who was saying it. It was like it might have been Jordan Peterson, one of these people, that was saying, if you look at the statistics, like it's not necessarily the poverty that causes violence and crime. It tends to correlate, but it's not actually, like, there are plenty of areas that are like very poor that have low crime rates. And there are plenty of areas that are rich that have low. It's when you have the two of them right next to each other. And that's why urban areas, where you have like super really high property values next to like lower property values. And it's that juxtaposition of like haves and have-nots that creates this sort of cultural friction that tends to cause a lot more violence and, unrest and stuff like that. So, you can see it all over the world.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole different subject, but
no,
So-
that's no good. Yep.
well, my thought is, and without getting it, because I try to be as, we can both watch the same stuff and we can read the same details about this thing and be like, well, what's the standard of proof for like second and third degree? I mean, if you read these kind of things and this kind of stuff, like, well, what have the defense and the prosecution, what have they presented and all this kind of stuff? And we can have opinions about like, the technicality of the kind of stuff. And then there are other people who look at it more because they're coming at it from a whole different life experience. And they're saying like, well, justice isn't just about, a verdict in a trial. It's about a larger movement, which I understand. But we need to be very specific about the words that we use with like guilty and justice and all these kind of things, and I'm not trying to say that somebody else's opinion is necessarily wrong or whatever, but if we can easily get ourselves into like corners when we start using words like just and fair and right and these kind of stuff, because they have legal definitions and then they have more broader moral and cultural definitions. But like, so I'm not trying to like say that, I mean, I'm not trying to say that anybody's, is there a right position here? I mean, I think it's there's pretty black and white when it comes to like, should people be hurting each other? Should,
Right.
I think you and I would both agree that like people who are sworn to protect us, it's literally their job, should be protecting people. And it's a gross miscarriage of the role of the state when somebody ends up dead, regardless of extenuating circumstances, right? So we all come at it from agreeing that is a thing, right? And then we also all agree, I hope, that like destroying the private businesses of our neighbors is not a good thing, right? And that's not necessarily making an indictment upon the reason for a sort of cultural outrage that may be occurring. But my thought was, and this is kind of what we were talking about, I mentioned a couple days ago, but like the idea of America as a concept versus America like as a reality. And I think this is a key area where maybe people from like progressive areas and people from more conservative areas maybe have an impasse where they don't realize how the other person is looking at it. So, and I may be way off on this, but it strikes me as like, people from sort of traditional conservative, maybe Christian backgrounds, like red state, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant kind of people. The idea, there's like America, the idea, and America in reality aren't that different. America was founded on freedom and liberty, man. And we got a right to free speech, a right to hold our guns, and, and right to tell, serve Uncle Sam and kick the Brits out, whatever like sort of jingoistic stuff that people have been saying for the past couple hundred years. And so the promise of America, the promise of the Constitution wasn't at odds with that for a lot of people's lives, right? The idea of like, well, I get equal treatment under the law, man. You're innocent until proven guilty. Well, of course that's how it works. And, people from our background, I guess if I was going to take like a liberal, try to steel man the argument, I go, okay, well, yeah, for people who look like us, it's not as much of it's not cognitive dissonance as much.
Correct.
But then for people who aren't us, maybe for people who are, Black Americans or immigrants from wherever, or Chinese, building the railroad and all this kind of stuff, the promise of America as a concept was way different than the America they were experiencing in reality. So, these folks have been living for generations with this disconnect. And so what happens is that you have a group of people who, are protesting about the disparity between the concept of America, of what it should be, and the reality of it. And they're seeing this dissonance. And then people for whom that dissonance haven't noticed it. They're like, it's kind of like we were saying last week, where it's like you attack somebody's position, they feel like you're attacking them personally. So people who've built up their identity as I'm an American, man, and you attack America, you attack me. And it's like, okay, well, that's probably not going to be a very productive conversation, because without understanding, right? So, and then for a person to, on the flip side, for a person to take, okay, well, there's the concept of America and there's liberties and the state has this role and all this kind of stuff, and it's sort of esoteric and it's kind of nerdy or whatever. And then we say, well, okay, well, technically, we don't have racist laws on the books, because that's what the Civil Rights Act was for, and that's what all that that's why that stuff was so monumental. And if there's somebody like us might try to defend the concept or defend the system as it's supposed to be, and then somebody from a different experience would hear that and go, well, hold on, you're defending this thing that has been oppressing me, and they don't realize that there's from their perspective, it's not two different things. And so I think that's kind of where a lot of the impasse comes from, because, I've chosen to look at it like, let me back up. A person could make themselves crazy trying to figure out, like, well, how do I protest this thing without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? That's why you get like communist revolutions and stuff like that, where they're like, the whole system needs to go. It's all bad. Let it all burn. And I'm like, well, hold on. Maybe we can rationalize this in our head by saying America started out, it's like a child. You try to raise a kid to be a certain kind of adult, or to help them make their own smart choices and stuff, with the knowledge that they're not there yet, but that they will get there. And so, like, you can't judge a person for not being where they eventually will be. And so we look at America and we say, like, well, the arc of progress tends towards usually good things, right? There are some things that are continually getting worse, but like, for the most part, if you look at where we started, when America started, there was slaves, women couldn't vote. I mean, there was a lot of very egregious things that did not live up to the promise of what America should have been. And then over time,
thumbs up for land-owning white males, Dad. Come on, we're still doing good.
Yeah, we're both
hanging in there.
So
we're hanging in there by a thread. Thread, we're hanging in there.
It's weird. I mean, I would say there has not really ever been another experiment like that in history, has there? Where like, no, it was clearly a founding document. Like they're all making up as they went along, and then they gradually work up to that, right? And I feel like, I have the luxury, because of my life experience, I can say that, like, well, we're getting there. We're making progress, something to be proud of. But I'm sympathetic of the fact that, like, well, if I had the kind of life where the distance between these two things was causing me and my family real harm, I'd be pretty pissed off too. So, that's my way of, I guess, trying to steel man the other side of a lot of this stuff, and try to put myself in shoes that I haven't worn before. But that also, we could lead into a whole separate topic about, like, at what point does a person, at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our own actions, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong in making that argument. And I think that's a pretty accurate representation of that position. Whether it's accurate historically is a completely different question. And we're not going to knock this out in like 17, 20 minutes. But like, America is an idea. I don't know. I go back and forth. So yeah, American idea. Yes. So, they threw off the shackles of a minimally invasive government. Really. I mean, Britain didn't really do all that much to the colonists. I mean, gosh, the government is so much more involved in our lives now than it was then. Like, it would be people, if you were to revert back to just the Bill of Rights and what the original, how many amendments in the Constitution? I can't remember how many there were, like 13, something like that.
Well, the Bill of Rights was the first 10, right?
Yeah. Okay. Never mind. No. Well, yeah, the Bill of Rights, and then how many? Did they amend it right away? No, that was just the Bill of Rights. My historical ignorance here is showing. I didn't know we were going to get into a history lesson, but regardless, but like in general, but even then, like the federal government was a small was a small entity in the lives of the American people in general. The state and local governments had more control and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of gave more power to the people in their local spots. Unfortunately, that did still, for the time, that was pretty unique. Like you said, like there's not another, not extremely radical. And there was still but then there were people of their time. Women didn't have rights. Black people didn't have rights. Other minorities didn't have rights. Like really, the only people that had rights are the people that held the power structure in the government. Welcome to human existence, and that sucks. But up to that point, that led to, well, this is wrong, and this is the document we now have. With the Declaration, like all men created equal, all that stuff. So you're right. It was an ideal. They didn't live up to the ideal, and then the government, to its credit, is actually amendable and able to grow in good ways, and with people voting and being part of the representation.
I think that's one of the unique.
If that's your thing, but
that's one of the unique features of America, which was, to my knowledge, not present before, and maybe somebody's tried it before, but it's like it was specifically designed to be adjusted.
Correct.
Right. And like, there's provisions from the get-go of like, all right, look, we want to change something, we do amendments. If we want to change something more radical, then you got to get 2/3 and all this kind of, there's all this procedure to do so. I'm not aware of any other government that specifically writes in, hey, we can change this later on if people just, right. And the checks and balances, like every other government was basically like, well, I want to have as much power as possible. You know what I mean? Yeah. And this is like, no, the whole point is not to have as much power as possible. The gridlock is not a bug, it's a feature. It keeps everybody in Washington squabbling so that nothing changes too hard.
Right. No overcorrections. Yeah. Well, I mean,
except for now, where you just basically, it's just like every 4 or 8 years, everything goes whoosh and then whoosh.
Well, yeah, but also it also does it like constitutionally. It doesn't do it the way it's supposed to be done. Like it's just, executive orders half the time and all that stuff that changes.
Let's just add a bunch of Supreme Court justices that magically is the exact number that we need to get a majority.
See, look, there's another one. Like when a president wants to add judges that are ideologically, in line with them, that's called a president picking judges. And like now that's packing the court. So Donald Trump packed the court. So now there's talk about, well, yeah, maybe we'll actually, Donald Trump packed the court, so we'll pack the court. Let's just add 4 more justices or 3 more justices, and we'll pick them right now. That'll work. Even though that's not the definition of the pack the court, but that's just like one of those, another example. Sorry. Yeah. Sidebar. But like, Steelman, the other side of the argument, right? So I guess what the right-leaning conservatives, whatever, would say to your Steelman of the left argument is that, well, okay, yeah, that's great. We've already kind of touched on this. Like the system has improved. That's the whole point. Like everything can change. We have laws that are in place. We have the spirit of the law is equality. The spirit of the law is everyone is equal in the eyes of God, humanity, whatever, however you want to word it. And we've made progress over years to make things better. In fact, it's gotten so good that America has voted in the leader of the free world was Barack Obama, who is, if you remember, Dan, he was black. I'm not sure if you remember that, but
I heard something about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, rumors, hints and allegations, but like, it's the thing that if what you're saying is that if the other side is going, we're structurally just so racist and oppressive, and the history has impeded us to this point where we can't get ahead, and we have this rage and we have this anger. Like literally, you can do anything you want in this country, not like what everybody says when you're a kid, because they'll be like, you could be the president. You're probably not going to be the president, but you can literally do a lot of things. You can make a very comfortable life for yourself. You can support yourself. You can serve other people. You can go as far as your ambitions and your talents will take you. And some people can take that all the way to, again, the leader of the free world. Some people can do that to a nice middle-class living. Some people can do less than that. And that sucks. That's reality. And there's no getting around that. But that's not chalk it up to our society is so overbearing and terrible and racist that it requires you to now go into the streets and knock over a business because George Floyd died in Minneapolis and you're in Raleigh, Durham.
Well, I mean, I remember thinking last year around this time, like the idea that, so Levi and I were watching, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is to me the best of the sort of Planet of the Apes reboot movies. It's the one in the middle. And in that movie, it's like you've got this group of characters and this group of characters,
Yeah.
and the leaders of those groups are like, all right, well, obviously we don't want to fight because that's not good for anyone. You know, it's in a post-apocalyptic world. Who wants to fight? That's a waste of resources. But both sides had these fearful people that were kind of had just enough power to ruin it for everybody. And it was purely by accident because like I was just sitting there and my son and I, we were just sitting there talking about like all the stuff that's going on, and I was trying to like instill a sense of like it's okay to, like it is dealing with people in general, whether it's like dealing with children or dealing in like in a relationship or marriage or something like that, where it's like when somebody gets upset about something, you're not going to do very well if you just go, no, I disagree with your point and therefore your emotion is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not going to get anywhere. But to be able to like say, okay, well, I disagree with where you're coming from, but I understand that you feel very strongly, so I can validate that you're upset. And I know that sucks because I've been upset before, and I've been upset about things that were probably maybe not factually accurate, or maybe they were, like, but that doesn't change the emotion. And to it, a lot of times people, if they just feel heard, like they'll go, okay. And then maybe we can talk about the specifics of it later on. Like that's like in your personal life, that's a good way to go through like conflicts and stuff. So, I try to be very cognizant of the fact that like there are limits to my knowledge. And even though the knowledge that I have may lead me towards, certain conclusions and viewpoints and certain policy prescriptions about what I think may or may not work, because I'm not in charge, that ultimately doesn't really matter that much, but what it comes down to is like, well, am I being a dick to my fellow human beings? And I think if people would just, learn how to validate an emotion without having to validate that perspective, that's like one step towards de-escalation. And by converse, right, too, like somebody says, if somebody has an objection to a point that somebody's making, like, well, I think that this, and they're throwing out like 5 different statements, and therefore I feel an emotion, and they're expressing their emotion, and you go, okay, well, are we talking about your emotion because that's emotions are valid, or are we talking about the statements that you make? Because we can talk about the statements you made. The problem is if you talk about the statement and you say, I think that's inaccurate, and actually, if you look it up, blah, 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 people go, well. People they feel like they're,
but I still feel right. I still feel
this
way.
And
even right.
There's the old thing. It's like once you start yelling, nobody hears what you're saying. So, it behooves everybody to try to practice those. Like those are usually like one-on-one tactics for how to deal with people. But I think maybe if we adopted that like 1 million people strong, and we all just kind of go, okay, hold on, that might maybe we'll get somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, yeah, you're right though. I mean, because like. It's wise for everybody in every situation when there's a pressure point, just hang tight. Just let's think about this. Take a step back, take a breath, collect your thoughts. If someone wants to talk, let them talk. If you want to say something, maybe. And I am not the poster child for this. Like, collect your thoughts before you say something, right?
No, neither am I.
Yeah. So,
well, and it's the kind of thing where it's the old Kennedy.
No,
Kennedy
I love that. Oh, go ahead. Yep.
Well, he was like, that was who. Oh, I can't do the Kennedy voice, but like, it just sounds like Mayor Quimby. But it's like
that's it though. That's it.
Yeah, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a great point. Right. We have to allow for the process to do its thing, and we have to allow for cultural change to make its thing. Assuming that the change that is being talked about is a good one, right? But like, but because if we don't, then it's just going to explode, and that's how you end up with all. Think about all the other revolutions in the world that many of them don't go well, right?
No,
so I think in this case you've got a group of people who think well we haven't exhausted all. It's stupid for you to be violent and enraged because you haven't exhausted all of the peaceful avenues of changing the world, which I think is probably true in a lot of ways. I mean, I think there is a reason that the system has its checks and balances built in there. But I'm also understanding that somebody else could come out and go, hey, look, man, we've been trying peaceful strategies for a long time, and it doesn't feel like anything's being accomplished. And I don't necessarily agree with that perspective, but I understand the feeling.
Yeah, exactly, because you said feeling twice. So I feel like progress isn't okay. But again, those are your feelings. That's okay. And like you can look at things analytically. You can look at facts. Lots of metrics would probably push back on that. Doesn't mean it pushes back on that for every single individual, because that's an anecdote. And I mean, there are plenty of people who got a short shrift in life, man, and they're doing terrible, and they do not have a good lot, and that's just awful. But that's compared to the rest of the world. If you're an American, listen, you are born in the greatest place on the greatest time ever to be born of a human being that has ever happened, short of like Adam and Eve. It's like in the garden.
No,
so,
I tell my kids that all the time.
Yeah, like you kids, you have no idea. They're like, the internet's out in the car. I'd be like, oh, I can't even explain to you how many things I could argue about or just tell you about in that one sentence.
They didn't put lettuce on my chicken sandwich at Chick-fil-A.
Netflix is down.
Yeah.
I can only watch Hulu and Disney Plus and HBO Max.
I only have access to 300 movies at once. No, I mean, like, I think about that a lot
in
terms of
for free.
Yeah. I think about that a lot in terms of like, where I want to be like with my career and like, what kind of house do I want to have? And like, yeah, look, I could easily go out and be like, oh, well, my friend has a house that looks like this, or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, wait a second. Like my grandparents would be thrilled to have the creature comforts that, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I gotta, my phone could send something to the moon in terms of, it's like,
and man, just again, speaking out of turn as a pasty white ass male, 60 years ago, people of color had a shit run of it in this country, man. And to be honest with you, I just looking around, it's not that bad compared to that. Yeah. Like, it's not illegal for whites and blacks to marry. That was a thing that was within recent memory. Like segregation of schools was a thing within recent memory. Like there were people who were alive that were protesting that. And but then like as soon as I said that, I heard the pushback. But like, wow, we were pushbacking against that on a cultural level. There were riots and there was pushback. Like, well, yeah, but there was an actual thing there that is immoral and wrong. Like there was government discrimination on local and state levels that people fought against, and they rightly so. They should have, because that's immoral and wrong. There's no reason to discriminate against people through law, through business, through any of your personal interactions based on immutable characteristics like skin color. But now it's the pendulum. We are so far past the civil rights movement that we're now. Gosh, we're going to get to another subject. I'm not trying to do that. We're now actively discriminating against the other side.
Well, there's the two things. The two things can be true at once thing.
I love this. This is nope. That's such a good point, and it's very true, because again, we're talking nuance and stuff, and it's not all or nothing. It's never all or nothing.
Yeah. Well, I remember thinking that, like when I had braces when I was like, I think I was like 28. And I didn't really get them of my own choice. I was kind of pushed into it, and I didn't really know.
Like the dentist cornered you and
it was
threatened your family.
Story. So I got these braces because it was going to be better for me. I was going to look better, and spoiler alert, plot twist, it did make my teeth look better, no question. But so the point was that I kind of had a bad attitude about it because it was painful, and nobody really told me exactly how painful it was going to be. The orthodontist was incredibly vague about the timetables. It'll be like 12, 18 months. And then 24, 36 months later, they're still cranking away in there. And it was just, I was really, and I felt very kind of alone because I would complain about it because I can't eat lunch. You know what I mean? And it hurts way worse when you're an adult than when you're a teenager, I found out. But and I remember thinking, people would tell me, how when you complain about something, people always try to throw their own 2 cents in there. They'd be like, well, I had it, as a teenager, and it hurt, or I had this problem, or I had cancer, or some sort of crazy thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know that you're right. That does give me perspective that, life could be worse, but that doesn't change the fact that I do have this. It's okay for me for there to be levels, if I break my leg and I got bone protruding out of my leg, I'm not going to die from that. Right. It's different than having lupus, or the emotional pain of, say, a child dying or something there's always something worse, right? But it's we don't have to shame each other because of something isn't as bad as it could be, or as bad as it used to be, or it was, right?
Correct.
And so
yes.
What I try, but it also understanding that there is levels, you go, okay, well, I was in a car accident and I broke my arm. It's well, it's okay for me to say this really hurts like hell. at the same time being thankful that I'm alive.
Right.
And so, you know, it feels like we're invalidating a person's emotion by saying, well, you know, it could be a lot worse. It used to be a lot worse. But how do we do that in a way that validates the reality of what is here now? And
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, right? That's probably for some
Neither do I.
high-level psychologist who's going to be able to figure out how to parse that out. But
That's
I do
probably why.
recognize that,
No, I was saying it's probably why we're resident to talk about it a little bit. You know.
well, yeah. I mean, it's a lot easier to do when you're like sort of in the privacy of like people who know you. And like when you're talking to your friends and your family, they're like, well, I know this person is speaking these things in good faith. So I'm not going to try to find the 1 out of 10 interpretation that's as horrible as possible. But in a public forum, you know, you're posting stuff and on social media and, you know, well, okay, how can I possibly interpret this? Oh, here's an interpretation that makes this person seem like a Nazi. That's the one I'm going with, you know? And then it just goes from there.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I'm with you, man. But I don't know. So these were larger overarching thoughts, but
well, yeah.
Again, we're not going to solve anything here, but it's good to talk it out. But it's the thing, like, so we get to talk it out because we're friends and we can chat, and we do that on the text threads and stuff like that. But this is more fun, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean,
my main takeaway is that like I can have opinions about like, you know, it's like, you know, people want like to watch, everybody loves watching these like true crime shows and stuff. Like people like the nitty gritty of like how things work in the legal system. But like, you know, so we can have opinions about that. But like at the end of the day, like my main takeaway is like, well, how does this? I like the psychology of it more than the specifics. You know, so like I'm trying to find this like it's what's fascinating to me is how people and like the sort of group mentality and how movements get started and stuff like this. And you know, I try to find the humanity in the part that's relatable in a group that's different than me.
Yes,
I try to because I don't want to be a jerk.
And so do I. Yeah. I don't want to be a jerk either, and I don't want to presume to speak for somebody who has I don't like this term, lived experience, which is different than mine. But again, because but I mean that with all sincerity from a empathetic point of view. Like you don't want to do that. That's not fair. I wouldn't want somebody to do it to me. I don't want to do it to them. However, if there's an empirical reality that you're pushing against, I would strongly.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is
at some point push back. At some point, I mean, and there's a time and a place for it.
Well, there's a reason that like judges have to recuse themselves from things, right? Like you don't want lived experience is actually a detriment in a lot of ways because you know,
exactly.
You're right. So,
you know, I will say though, out of the whole thing, you know, from a relatively libertarian point of view, a cop that did a pretty bad thing, like over excessive force, no matter how you're looking at it from the trial, the guy died because of from what he did or didn't do. And then he got held accountable. So that's intense. And it might not be what's needed.
I mean, not to get into the specifics, but it's not that simple either. I mean, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances surrounding that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hey, we said we were going to do this, Dan.
Okay. Yeah. Right. I don't, you know.
Gosh, I'm just saying. No, I mean, maybe later.
Yeah.
That's on the Patreon. We don't have a Patreon. Gotta get a Patreon. But like, so the cry for justice and the feeling of relief for that, I can empathize with that. I do feel that way. All in all, I mean, there are instances where there's abuse of power, on whatever level abuse of power is. This one is a police person to a citizen. So that happens. And when it's wrong, it's wrong. And when there's people held accountable to whatever degree they're held accountable, that's a good thing.
Well, and it may be one of these things where, you know, casual observers might be like, well, this is taking it too far. This is a bit of an extreme reaction or whatever. And then, you know, kind of like with the Me Too thing, things eventually sort of level out, you know, and then I don't know if that's the most efficient way to make cultural progress. I mean, like I had a lot of issues with the Me Too thing.
Ebbs, flows.
Because it was like, hold on, are we just abandoning the idea of due process? I mean, like we said last week, where it's like culture is or law is downstream of culture, right? So it's like, okay, well, if we're establishing a culture where due process doesn't matter at all, that's a problem because these are the people who are going to be, you know, judges and prosecutors and adjudicators like later on. So, but you know, the Me Too thing kind of had its whoosh, its zeitgeist, and then it magically stopped, which, you know, I don't know if everybody knows why it magically stopped, but
No, I get that. That's a decent parallel.
well, but what's happened is that, I mean, the Me Too thing isn't really happening right now. It's not the zeitgeist.
Correct.
But I guarantee that, like, as a culture at large, we're all way more aware of these kind of things.
Yes.
Hopefully we've, as a culture, moved a little bit this way in terms of like, all right, well, maybe a lot of that stuff was blown out of proportion and that was kind of crazy, right? But I think men are a lot more cognizant of what they're doing and saying, so that's a good thing. But is that, you know, does the ends justify the means? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, look, man, we're at 45 minutes. We didn't do a typical light topic, so just let me ask you a question, okay? Crap, I don't have anything that's really clever. Let me see. Let's see. I don't know.
Van Halen versus Van Hagar.
Oh, all right. So we can discuss this later. This is a teaser, okay? All right. On 3, give our answers. We'll go 1, 2, 3. Answer. Ready?
All right.
And then we'll give our reasons next week. 1, 2, 3. Van Hagar.
We're in agreement.
Nice. This is great.
Only by a notch.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll talk about it next week. I think I got, well, whatever. We probably have similar reasons. But hey,
we can talk about music next week instead of something important.
Let's do both.
Okay.
I don't know.
Make sure you like and subscribe to This Should Be the Podcast on YouTube.
It was. I did see like 1 or 2 comments coming in really late. So sorry guys, we didn't really.
The problem is
get to those.
Has become all snowflakes.
Well, everyone is so emotionally sensitive. Grow a backbone. Again, there are those who are snowflakes and have no backbones and are very emotionally sensitive. But
that is true.
You should be sensitive to their emotional sensitivity.
Yeah, I mean,
right? I mean, kind of. No.
Hey, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm where I am in life because of a lot of therapy and emotions and people. I mean, you've been my friend through a lot of the worst parts of my life, and you know that I've gone up and I have my ups and downs, and so I recognize that emotions are what they are, and to discount them is folly. Now, one of my rules that I always tell my kids is like, emotions are an important part of the team, but they should never be the coach. So, you know, you can ignore them at your own peril, but you also can, if you don't want to be led by them also. But yeah. Dr.
Dan laying down some truth there.
What you guys need to understand is that when you're having a feeling.
All right, man. Well, look, cheers. Have a good night. This was fun.
All right, man. We'll talk next week.
All right, next week. All right, later.